I like a good fight. I'm interested in how people argue. And not just in any setting. I'm interested in how people argue in public and in private settings. Because argumentation processes are quite complex, actually. It's not really that straightforward. Take, for example, my husband and I. Right? I'm Greek, my husband's English. And last month we had to argue about something quite trivial, as like the colour of the curtains, or something like that. And of course I screamed and I shouted and I broke a vase and I tore down the curtains in the end and I lashed onto him with a wooden spoon and I said, "You've ruined my life." To which he replied, "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way." Then last week we had another argument, but that was about something a little bit more serious. It was about our daughter's nursery. So, of course, I screamed and I shouted and I broke another vase and I tore down the remainder of the curtains and I lashed onto him with a knife this time and I said, "Look, that's it. I'm leaving you. I'm divorcing you. I'm going to live with my mom's." To which he said, "Well, give him my regards." So, argumentation processes are quite complex. This was a private argument, and it can go in a good way, it can go a bad way. But imagine this. Imagine if Rodney and I, that's my husband, it's not the guy from Pony, Fools and Horses, by the way, even though there's not much difference to be fair. Imagine if Rodney and I were actually politicians, and we argued in a political setting. Now, UK politicians argue in a certain way, as you probably all know. What was it that Harriet Harman said one day? "There's one ginger rodent that I don't want to see in the Highlands, and that's Danny Alexander." It's a politician talking about another politician at a party conference, These people, they can just come out with all sorts of things. "Calm down, dear," David Cameron said in Parliament. And of course, in the Parliament, in the back, you have, boo, boo, the dog likes something. It's like being in a football match. I think the technical term for it is Yahoo politics. It took scientists years to come up with that. But this is not how people argue in their everyday lives, isn't it? How British people argue in their everyday lives. They're a little bit more phlegmatic, a bit more laid back, a bit more ironic, more witty. It's different, isn't it? And if you take the Greeks, for example, Greek Parliament is just a big bore, it's dry, it's uninteresting, there's no substance. It's a total contrast to the UK Parliament where it's very animated, there's a lot of enthusiasm, there's a lot of and there's no substance. But then if we contrast that to the way Greek everyday people argue, it's totally different, right? Because they will scream and they will shout and they will insult each other's mothers and they will probably get into a fist fight, and afterwards they'll just go out for an ouzo and everyone's going to be happy. So argumentation processes are quite complex, you see. And if Rodney and I had to argue as politicians in each other's parliaments, then that would have made things even more complex. That's because we would, of course, have to speak a different language. And when we speak a different language, we become different people. We acquire different characteristics. Take my 20-month-old daughter, for example. She's just learning how to speak. We're trying to raise her bilingual, and she has some English words. Daddy, happy, and hiya. Her Greek words are oshi, no, and I swear she's never had a tantrum in an English-speaking environment, ever. So when we speak different languages, we become different people. There's also the theory, though, that it doesn't matter what language we speak. If we argue in a certain way, we will argue in the same way, regardless of the language we use. So let's try and find another example of a place where many languages are used in a political setting where you have to argue, the EU Parliament, of course. 28 different members of the EU. For those of you who didn't know it, Croatia just joined, well done. And 24 official languages. Imagine a parliament where 24 different languages are spoken. And also different argumentation traditions. I mean, if you really can't imagine, let's forget about the interpreters for a moment, yeah, because they do have interpreters, but let's just imagine that they're on strike on that day, and politicians have nothing else to help them. So, they will probably speak English. I mean, I'm an interpreter myself, I speak 4 languages, but in a multilingual setting, I will opt for English. It's funny that. So, in the EU Parliament, let's take the example of what happened back in 2010. I don't know if you remember, our very own Nigel Farage addressed the EU Parliament 3 years ago, and he addressed actually the President of the EU Council, who is Belgian. And he said to him, right after the Belgian guy was elected, right, he said to him, oh, so congratulations, you were elected, so we end up with you. You're supposed to be charismatic, but you have the charisma of a damp rag, and you look like a low-grade bank clerk, and it must be because you come from a non-country, which is Belgium. I mean, he seriously said all these things, by the way. And he launched into a tirade of 2 minutes of insults. I mean, the guy probably thought he was in the UK Parliament, where it's okay to say all these things, because people in the back will go, and it's all great. But this is the EU Parliament. We don't do things this way in the EU Parliament. Which is why the Belgian President of the EU Council replied with, I resent that comment, so I will not comment any further. You know, talk about a difference, a clash of cultures, a miscommunication, just, misunderstanding at every single level. I don't think I even have to analyze it for you. So, argumentation processes, they're quite complex. You have to look at so many different factors. There's a German theorist, actually, let's call him Jürgen, shall we? That is actually his real name. He said that the purpose of any debate should be either understanding or agreement. Well, sorry, Jürgen, but none of the examples that we saw thus far aimed at either understanding or agreement. The aim of any argument is to win the argument, right? It's to win the argument and to get your own way. Now, but why is this so difficult? Why do we have such difficulty in arguing and getting our own way? Because of misunderstandings. And misunderstandings happen because most of the time, when we speak, we think that what we say is just perfectly clear. It's not. That's a very huge assumption to make. So what can we do about it? Well, 2 things. Number 1, awareness. If we're aware of the situation, it's halfway in dealing with the problem. Number 2, for the English native speakers among you, why don't you learn a foreign language? It might actually help you. It's very good fun. You can travel, you can meet other people. Just travel in a foreign country, pick up the local lingo. If you can't do it, pick up one of the locals. It can help you a lot, for your language skills. But, just put in the effort, because it would help immensely in multilingual settings. Well, I'm Katerina Strani, and this is my research. And if you don't agree with some of the things I said, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. Thank you very much.